Selfishly, I wish this wasn't my last memory of my mother, her casket being lowered into the ground. But if I'm being picky, I wouldn't want any of the memories from the past couple of years to be the last one either. Watching her gradually weaken, the light that once shone so brightly eventually dimming until I had to squint to see it. I'd barely even seen her at all these past 6 months, not since she was moved from her home to a city hospital in Madison. My father allowed me to visit her every few weeks, but only for 10 minutes at a time, and always with him, and usually at least one nurse hovering nearby. I wasn't there for her last moments. I heard the phone ring in the middle of the night and woke up to find Mrs. Bringsome, the woman who lives next to us, making breakfast. Later that afternoon, Daddy arrived home looking older than I recalled him being the day before. "It's just the two of us now, Joy," he said somberly. Then he disappeared into his study. It might seem harsh on his part, but he had just lost his wife. And what else was there to say, except to confirm that the invisible clock that had been counting down had finally reached 0. But I was grateful that Mrs. Bringsome was there, and that she didn't hesitate to engulf me in a hug, the smell of garlic and rosemary infused in the folds of her apron unexpectedly comforting. Mrs. Bringsome and her husband are among the mourners now, gathered beside Mama's gravesite, hands clasped in front of them, heads bowed. I was surprised by how many people showed up. It seemed like every adult in our town had put aside their lives for the day to join us at the tiny cemetery, where only a few crisp leaves still clung to the skeletal trees surrounding us. As I looked around the gathering in awe just before the service started, Mrs. Bringsome put her hand gently on my shoulder and whispered in my ear, "You can see how much your mother was loved," she said. "Such a good woman." I smiled back proudly. What a nice thing to have people say about you when you're gone. A small crowd murmurs a prayer as the casket disappeared from view. I summon as much poise and courage as I can, standing next to Daddy at the front. I want Mama to be proud of me in this moment. I don't want to break down and make it about me. I step forward, throwing a rose into the rectangular chasm that will now and forever hold my mother. As I step back, I reach for Daddy's hand. It remains stiff, like he hasn't felt my gesture at all. My body runs cold, as though an icy breeze has blown across the cemetery. And then I feel a gentle touch on my other hand, someone pressing their palm into mine and closing it tightly with their fingers. I turn, a mixture of surprise and gratitude returning warmth to my body. Hazel grins at me, squeezing my hand tightly. Her unruly curls are coaxed into 2 neat braids. I didn't even know she was here. She must have been standing at the back of the crowd and pushed through. I wasn't sure she'd attend, given my father's unvarnished disapproval of her. But here she is, coming to my rescue again. I smile through tears, buoyant with thanks, and I squeeze her hand right back. I have to lift the cemetery gate to open it, a warped and rusted metal, a precursor to the generally unloved state of the grounds. Could have buried Tom in one of the larger, more well-maintained private cemeteries in the area, but they felt so clinical and impersonal. All the headstones almost identical. Elizabeth and I agreed that this smaller cemetery had much more character, and that Tom would enjoy this particular plot under a grand oak tree. Unfortunately, funding for this cemetery's upkeep is scarce, and the weeds get out of control if you don't tend to them regularly. Those yellow flowers might look pretty, but they're a menace if left unbridled. set my basket down and unload everything I need. My gardening mat. My knees aren't as hardy as they used to be. Pruning shears, gardening gloves, a cloth and a spray bottle to wipe down the headstone, and a bunch of orange roses freshly picked from my garden. I've come here almost every Thursday morning since Tom died. It feels like keeping up my end of the bargain. Just as Mama advised me to, I married a man who was dependable, at least in the sense that he made sure Elizabeth and I lived a comfortable life. And just as Mama said I would, I grew to love him, though unfortunately it was never that burning, star-crossed love that I enjoyed reading so much about, more of a deep affection. I also felt indebted to Tom for offering me a life outside of my father's purview. Had I not met him all those years ago, I might have lived out all my days in that same house with my father, working as his receptionist in his medical practice. In a way, I went from taking care of one man to taking care of another, but it meant that eventually I got to experience motherhood, and best of all, I got to be closer to Hazel in New York City. So the least I can do is keep Tom's final resting place tidy, even if not all my years with him were rosy. The mid-morning sun climbs higher in the sky, vanquishing the remaining shade. I wish I'd thought to bring a bottle of water and a sun hat. The lifetime spent outside in the garden has left its mark on my body. Many marks, in fact. And none of them have turned out to be cancers. A few have showed potential and had to be removed. The thing about sun damage is that it's there and lurking under the skin, but it takes decades to actually show up, and by that time it can be too late. And since my generation wasn't the best about sun protection, I only started using sunscreen in the 90s. I need to be extra vigilant. I hastily roll down my shirt sleeves and flip up my collar to cover my neck. It takes me another hour to finish tidying Tom's grave. When I'm done, I can't help looking guiltily at the ones nearby, all in various states of unruliness. Perhaps their loved ones have moved away from Beacon or are also buried here, so there's no one left to tend to them. I know I can't take care of them all, otherwise I'd be here all day, so I do the ones that look the most unloved, hoping that a stranger might pay the same courtesy to Mama and Daddy's headstones back in Wisconsin. I haven't been there since Daddy's funeral more than 50 years ago, so who knows what state they're in. It pains me to think of those graves covered in grime and overcome by weeds. At least they're side by side. There's comfort in knowing that. There's no room next to Tom in this cemetery, but that's okay, because I don't want to be buried. A cardboard casket and a cremation is just fine for me. No need to be a burden to anybody. I suppose I should ask Hazel what her wishes are. How do you even work that into a conversation? I think I'll put it off as long as I can, especially since I still haven't broken the news to Elizabeth about Hazel's condition. I still remember her wail when I had to call her to let her know that Tom had just had a ruptured brain aneurysm in our front yard. I can't bear the thought of having to do it again. Gosh, I'm feeling gloomy in spite of this beautiful day. Even the birds singing in the tree above me stirs no joy in my heart. If only I could have held on to that rush I felt yesterday in that Brooklyn park to somehow bottle it to use in moments like these. It was the most alive I've felt in weeks. And what had made it even more satisfying was Hazel's reaction when I presented her with the goods. I knew you had it in you, Joey, she said, her eyes sparkling in a way that I hadn't when I'd left the loft earlier. I've missed that mischievous glimmer in her irises, her trademark ever since I met her as a spirited 8-year-old girl. The fact that I found a way to resurrect it gives me a smidge of hope. Who knew that breaking a rule could yield such positive results? I'm a bit surprised at myself that something that would have seemed unfathomable, unconscionable just a week ago came to me with ease. How I was able to shrug off the creep of guilt by focusing on the reason I was doing it. Hazel. Perhaps that's true of many people who commit crimes, especially petty ones. We only hear about the misdemeanor itself, but we never hear why the person did it. If we did, we might all be more compassionate. In truth, I've been an accessory to theft many times in my life. I've turned a blind eye at the grocery store when seeing a young mother sneak jars of baby food into her bag, or a man slipping a box of chocolates into his jacket the day before Christmas. They needed those things more than the wealthy corporation they were stealing from. They're victims of a system that doesn't support them. But I'm much more tolerant of the misdeeds of others than of my own. If I'm being honest, I've spent my entire adult life trying not to disappoint my parents, even though they've both been gone for decades. I still feel my father's reproachful eye in any authority figure. The electricity company when I forget to pay the bill, the doctor when she tells me my cholesterol is too high, and don't get me started on my fear of running afoul of the IRS. Anytime I step a toe out of line, I invariably feel like I've disappointed and displeased him, or that I've become an imposition in the way my mother cautioned against. Perhaps because I had so little time with both of my parents when they were healthy and happy, I've held on even more tightly to those moments when they told me I was a good girl. Once Mama became sick and my father became more distant, their praise grew increasingly weird. And yet, I still believed if I did everything right, I might get the feeling of validation back. In retrospect, it's absurd that I'm almost 90 and still defining myself by my mother and father's influence. As children, we are canvases, eager to be painted by our parents' brush of life wisdom. We don't question the quality of the tools, or the paint, or the skill of the artist. We accept the things they teach us as sacred words to guide us through life. But I've now accrued the equivalent of 2 of Mama's lifetimes. Who's to say she knew the right way to live? Wasn't she just passing on what her mother taught her? Do we ever truly shed the lessons ingrained in us as kids? Or are they part of our beings forever? Is there still time for me to try out a different way of being in the world? I think I'd like to find out.